You wake up and within 60 seconds it starts. The phone is already in your hand. The notifications are already pulling at your attention. The kitchen counter has the junk food at eye level. The gym bag is buried somewhere in the closet. And before you have even finished your first conscious thought, the day has already been shaped by forces you did not choose. You tell yourself you will do better tomorrow. You tell yourself you just need more motivation, more discipline, more willpower. But here is the truth nobody wants to say out loud. You are fighting a war against an enemy that never sleeps, never tires, and never stops pushing. Your environment. And it is winning. Not because you are weak, but because you are fighting the wrong battle. The costly mistake almost everyone makes is this. They try to out-willpower their surroundings. They rely on raw motivation to overcome a world designed to derail them. And every single morning, the environment wins. Because it never gets tired, and you do. Discipline is not about forcing yourself to resist temptation 1,000 times a day. That is exhausting. That is unsustainable. And honestly, that is not even what discipline is. Real discipline is something quieter, something most people never experience. It is the art of arranging your life so that the right choice requires less effort than the wrong one. Discipline is not something you exert. It is something you build into the architecture of your day. And once you understand that, everything changes. Here is the core idea I want you to hold on to. Discipline is not something you feel. It is something you design. You engineer your world so that virtue becomes the path of least resistance. That is the Stoic insight the ancients understood deeply, even if they never used the language of habit loops and cues. They lived it. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations in a war tent on the Danube frontier, surrounded by chaos, plague, political betrayal, and military crisis. He did not have a quiet study. He did not have ideal conditions. And yet he understood that the way you structure your inner and outer world determines whether you hold together or fall apart. The Stoics did not believe in relying on willpower alone. They believed in designing a life where the right thing was the natural thing. Where discipline was not a daily battle but a daily default. Think about what that means. Most people call this a mourning. The Stoics would call it a surrender. You wake up and hand your attention to the first thing that grabs it. You let your phone set your emotional state before you have even decided what kind of person you want to be today. You let the kitchen decide what you eat. You let the layout of your home decide whether you move your body or collapse on the couch. And then you wonder why you feel like you are constantly losing. You are not losing because you lack character. You are losing because you are playing a game rigged against you, and you have not yet changed the rules. So let us change the rules. Let me walk you through 5 environment changes that make discipline automatic. Not easier. Automatic. Because when you design your world correctly, you stop needing to feel motivated. You stop needing to pump yourself up. You stop needing to fight yourself. The right thing just becomes the obvious thing. The easy thing. The thing that happens almost without you deciding. The first change is this. Make the good obvious and the bad invisible. This is the most fundamental law of behavior change, and the Stoics understood it at a deep level. Epictetus taught that you should keep before your eyes what kind of person you want to be, and let that image shape your daily choices. He was talking about mental environment design. The things you keep in front of your mind determine the person you become. But the same principle applies to your physical world. Your environment is the invisible hand that shapes your behavior, and most people never even see the hand. They just feel its grip. Here is what nobody tells you. The people who seem to have incredible self-control usually do not have more willpower than you. They have simply structured their lives to need less self-control. That is the secret. The disciplined person is not the one resisting temptation all day. The disciplined person is the one who removed the temptation from their environment so they never have to resist it in the first place. Think about that. Every time you have to resist something, you spend a unit of energy you will not get back. Every time you have to say no to the junk food in the pantry, every time you have to ignore the phone buzzing on your desk, every time you have to talk yourself into going to the gym when your bag is not packed, you are spending energy on resistance instead of action. And you only have so much energy in a day. So change the first law. Make the cues for the habits you want obvious. Make the cues for the habits you do not want invisible. If you want to read more, put the book on your pillow. Not on a shelf. Not on a nightstand buried under 3 other things. On your pillow, so you physically cannot get into bed without moving it. If you want to stop mindlessly scrolling, put the phone in another room overnight. Not across the room. In another room. So that picking it up requires you to get out of bed, walk down the hall, and open a door. That is friction. And friction is your friend when it is placed between you and the thing you do not want to do. Most people think discipline means having the willpower to resist the donut on the counter. That is not discipline. That is self-torture. Discipline is throwing the donut away and replacing it with a bowl of apples. Discipline is redesigning the counter so that the first thing your hand reaches for is something that serves you. You are not weak for reaching for the donut. Your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do. It is gravitating toward the most available, most visible source of quick energy. The problem is not your brain. The problem is your environment. Change the environment and you change the behavior. Not through force. Through design. The second change. Make the good easy and the bad difficult. Human behavior follows a simple law. The law of least effort. We naturally gravitate toward whatever requires the least work. This is not a character flaw. This is biology. Your brain is an energy conservation machine. It will always prefer the path that costs less. So instead of fighting that, use it. Make the good habit the path of least resistance. Make the bad habit the path of most resistance. Here is where the 2-minute rule comes in. And this is one of the most powerful tools for identity-level change that I know of. The rule is simple. When you start a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do. Not because 2 minutes is enough to transform your life. But because 2 minutes is enough to show up. And showing up is the whole game. The goal is not to do 45 minutes of journaling. The goal is to become the kind of person who journals. The goal is not to run 5 miles. The goal is to become the kind of person who runs. And you become that kind of person by showing up, even in the smallest way, every single day. You do not need to meditate for 30 minutes. You need to sit on the cushion. That is the 2-minute version. You do not need to read a chapter. You need to open the book. You do not need to do a full workout. You need to put on your gym shoes. Once you are on the cushion, once the book is open, once the shoes are on, the momentum usually carries you further. But even if it does not, even if you only sit for 2 minutes, you have still cast a vote for the kind of person you want to become. And identity is built one vote at a time. The Stoics practiced something like this instinctively. Seneca, every evening, would review his day. Not in exhausting detail. He would ask himself a few simple questions. What did I do well today? Where did I fail? What could I do better? It took minutes. But it built the identity of a person who examines his own life. And that identity, reinforced nightly, shaped everything else. He was not trying to be perfect in one grand gesture. He was trying to be the kind of person who reflects. And that small daily practice, repeated over years, is what makes a person unshakable. So make the good easy. Reduce the friction between you and the thing you want to do. Want to work out in the morning? Lay out your clothes the night before. Pack the gym bag. Put it by the door. Put your keys on top of it so you cannot leave without picking it up. Want to eat better? Prep the vegetables on Sunday so that on Wednesday, when you are tired and hungry and tempted to order takeout, the healthy option is already there, already ready, already easier than the phone. Want to write every day? Leave the document open on your computer. Leave the pen on the notebook. Remove every step between you and the first word. The fewer steps between you and the action, the more likely you are to do it. Not because you are more motivated. Because you have made it easier to do the right thing than to avoid it. And do the opposite for the bad habits. Add friction. Make them difficult. If you want to watch less television, take the batteries out of the remote. Unplug the television. Better yet, put the television in a closet and only take it out when you have deliberately decided to watch something. If you want to drink less, do not keep alcohol in the house. If you want to stop staying up too late on your phone, charge it in the kitchen, not in the bedroom. Every step you add between you and the unwanted behavior is a step you do not have to resist. The friction does the resisting for you. The environment does the work. The third change. Make the good attractive and the bad unattractive. Here is where temptation bundling comes in, and it is more powerful than most people realize. The idea is simple. You take something you already want to do and pair it with something you need to do. You only let yourself listen to your favorite podcast while you are walking. You only let yourself drink your favorite coffee while you are journaling. You only let yourself watch your favorite show while you are folding laundry or stretching. You bundle the reward with the effort. What this does is hijack your dopamine system in the service of your goals. Dopamine is not the reward chemical. It is the anticipation chemical. It spikes before you do something you enjoy. It is what pulls you toward the behavior. So when you bundle a temptation with a discipline, you transfer some of that dopamine pull onto the discipline itself. The craving for the podcast becomes a craving for the walk. The desire for the coffee becomes a desire for the journaling session. You are not relying on willpower. You are relying on desire. You are redirecting it. The Stoics understood something about desire that modern psychology is only now catching up to. Epictetus said that the key to freedom is not eliminating desire but redirecting it. You do not stop wanting things. You change what you want. You train your desires to point in the direction of your values. And temptation bundling is a practical way to do exactly that. You are not telling yourself to stop wanting pleasure. You are making pleasure serve your discipline. You are making the reward work for you instead of against you. Most people try to white-knuckle their way through temptation. They sit with the junk food in the house and tell themselves they will not eat it. They sit with the phone next to them and tell themselves they will not check it. And they fail. Not because they are weak, but because they are fighting their own neurochemistry with nothing but willpower. That is a losing battle. You will always eventually lose to your own dopamine system if you try to fight it head-on. So do not fight it. Redirect it. Bundle. Pair. Make the good thing the thing you crave. and make the bad thing unattractive. This is harder, but it is possible. One way is to attach a cost. Every time you do the thing you are trying to stop, you have to do something you dislike. Every time you check social media first thing in the morning, you have to do 20 push-ups. Every time you eat the junk food, you have to write down why you did it. You are adding a consequence that makes the behavior less appealing. You are making the reward less rewarding. And over time, the craving weakens. The fourth change. Make the good satisfying and the bad unsatisfying. This is the cardinal rule of behavior change. What is rewarded is repeated. What is punished is avoided. It is that simple. And that difficult. Because the problem with most good habits is that the reward is delayed. You eat well today, you feel nothing. You eat well for 6 months, you feel transformed. But your brain does not care about 6 months from now. Your brain cares about right now. Your brain is asking, what did I just get from this? And if the answer is nothing, the habit will not stick. So you have to create immediate satisfaction for the habits that serve you. Not because you are tricking yourself. Because you are acknowledging how your brain actually works. After you do the thing, give yourself a small reward. A moment of acknowledgement. A checkmark on a calendar. A stretch. A cup of tea. Something small, immediate, and pleasurable that tells your brain, that was good, do it again. The Stoics practiced a version of this. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself that the reward of a good action is the action itself. But for most of us, most of the time, we need something more tangible. We need a bridge between the effort and the eventual reward. A checkmark is a bridge. A moment of pride is a bridge. A deep breath of satisfaction after you have done the hard thing is a bridge. And for the bad habits, make them unsatisfying. Add a cost. Make the consequence visible. One of the most effective techniques is simple tracking. Get a calendar. Every day you do the good habit, put an X. Every day you break it, leave it blank. The chain of X's becomes its own reward. Breaking the chain becomes its own punishment. You are not relying on willpower. You are relying on the simple human desire to not break a streak. You are using your own psychology against your worst impulses and in favor of your best ones. The fifth change. And this is the one the Stoics kept most secret, hidden in plain sight. Design your environment for solitude and silence. The most powerful habit the Stoics maintained was not journaling, not cold baths, not voluntary discomfort, though they practiced all of those. The most powerful habit was withdrawal. Regular, deliberate withdrawal from the noise of the world into silence. Epictetus taught that you should withdraw into yourself regularly. Not to escape the world, but to return to it stronger. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind retreats into itself when it has a space to retreat to. He was talking about both a mental space and a physical one. Here is what nobody tells you about silence. Silence is not the absence of something. Silence is a practice. It is a discipline. And in a world that is constantly screaming for your attention, silence is the most radical environment change you can make. Your phone is a noise machine. Your television is a noise machine. Your social media feed is a noise machine. And noise is the enemy of self-knowledge. You cannot hear your own thoughts when the world is always talking. You cannot hear the quiet voice that tells you what matters, what you actually want, who you actually are. And so you live someone else's life. You chase someone else's goals. You adopt someone else's values. Not because you chose them, but because the noise never gave you a chance to choose. Design a space in your home for silence. It does not need to be a room. It can be a chair, a corner, a spot on the floor. But it needs to be a place where you go and there is nothing. No phone. No screens. No music. No input. Just you and your thoughts. Start with 2 minutes. The 2-minute rule applies here too. 2 minutes of silence is the gateway. 2 minutes of sitting with yourself, without distraction, without escape, is enough to begin hearing what you have been drowning out. And what you will hear may not be comfortable. You may hear anxiety. You may hear grief. You may hear the quiet desperation that you have been running from with every scroll, every snack, every distraction. But you will also hear something else. You will hear your own voice. The one that knows what it wants. The one that has been trying to reach you for years. The Stoics believed that the unexamined life is not worth living, and they practiced examination relentlessly. But you cannot examine a life you cannot hear. Silence is the precondition for self-knowledge. And self-knowledge is the precondition for everything else. For discipline. For virtue. For peace. You cannot build a life on a foundation you have never looked at. And you cannot look at the foundation when the construction noise never stops. So design for silence. Create a frictionless path to solitude. A chair that is always clear. A room that is always quiet. A time that is always yours. And make the noise difficult. The phone in another room. The notifications off. The door closed. The world can wait. It will still be there when you return. But you will return as yourself, not as a reflection of whatever the noise told you to be. Now let me bring these 5 changes together, because together they form something far more powerful than any one of them alone. You make the good obvious and the bad invisible. You make the good easy and the bad difficult. You make the good attractive and the bad unattractive. You make the good satisfying and the bad unsatisfying. And you design for silence, for solitude, for the space to hear yourself think. When you do all 5, something remarkable happens. You stop fighting. Not because you gave up. Because you won. You won the war before it started. You arranged the battlefield so that the enemy never had a chance. The donut is not in the house. The phone is in another room. The book is on your pillow. The gym bag is by the door. The silence is waiting for you. And suddenly, discipline is not a struggle. It is a default. It is what happens when you wake up and the world you built is working with you instead of against you. This is the Stoic insight at its deepest. You do not become disciplined by trying harder. You become disciplined by designing better. The Stoics did not believe in relying on motivation, because motivation is a feeling, and feelings are weather. They come and go. You cannot build a life on weather. You build a life on architecture. On structures that hold when the storm comes. And the storm always comes. The question is not whether you will face temptation, distraction, exhaustion, despair. The question is whether your environment will catch you or let you fall. Most people never design their environment. They inherit it. They accept the default settings of the modern world, which are engineered to capture attention, stimulate craving, and reward consumption. They live in a world built by corporations that profit from their distraction and wonder why they cannot focus. They wake up in a room designed to make them scroll and wonder why they cannot think. They eat in a kitchen stocked by a food industry that profits from their cravings and wonder why they cannot stop. The environment is not neutral. It never was. It is designed. The only question is whether you are designing it or someone else is. And here is what that pattern is costing you. Every day you live in an environment you did not design, you are leaking energy. You are spending your finite willpower on resistance instead of creation. You are fighting battles you do not need to fight, and by the time you get to the things that matter, you are exhausted. You still do not feel whole. You still do not feel like you. You look at your life and you see potential, you see the person you could be, and you feel the gap between that person and the one who keeps losing the same battles every day. That gap is not a character flaw. It is an architecture problem. And architecture can be fixed. But here is the harder truth. Fixing it requires you to stop outsourcing your self-control. Not to an app. Not to a guru. Not to an accountability partner. Not to a motivational video. Those things can help temporarily, but they are crutches. And crutches are fine when you are healing. But eventually you have to walk on your own. True discipline comes from within. You must become your own strict but compassionate taskmaster. You must look at your environment with clear eyes and say, this is not serving me, and I am going to change it. Not in a grand gesture. Not in one dramatic weekend overhaul. In small, incremental changes. One room at a time. One habit at a time. One piece of friction added or removed at a time. Because the most effective changes are small. A tiny habit that is easy to do and hard to skip is more valuable than an ambitious plan that collapses in a week. Moving your phone charger to the kitchen is a small change. Putting your book on your pillow is a small change. Laying out your gym clothes the night before is a small change. None of these feel heroic. None of these feel like the dramatic transformation you imagine when you think about changing your life. But that is exactly the point. The dramatic transformations fail. The small ones compound. 1% better each day, repeated over a year, does not add up. It multiplies. It compounds. And before you know it, you are living a different life. Not because you forced it. Because you designed it. Think about what it would feel like to wake up in a world that is working with you. The book is on your pillow. The gym bag is by the door. The phone is in another room. The kitchen is clean and the good food is visible and the junk food is not there. The chair in the corner is clear and waiting for you to sit in silence. You wake up and the first thing you see is not a notification but a reminder of who you want to be. The first thing you reach for is not a phone but a book. The first thing you do is not react but choose. What would that feel like? It would feel like freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want. That is not freedom. That is slavery to impulse. Real freedom is the freedom to be who you are. And you can only be who you are when the noise stops and the architecture holds and the world you built is finally on your side. This is what the Stoics were after. Not comfort. Not ease. Not the absence of struggle. They were after the kind of strength that comes from having your life in order. From knowing that your environment is not your enemy. From knowing that when temptation comes, you do not have to fight it alone because your world is built to help you win. They understood that the outer order creates inner order. That when your room is clear, your mind follows. That when your habits are designed, your character follows. That when your environment is intentional, your life follows. And let me say something about character, because this is where it all connects. Every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you want to become. Every time you choose the book over the phone, you are voting for the reader. Every time you choose the walk over the couch, you are voting for the person who moves. Every time you choose the silence over the noise, you are voting for the person who knows themselves. And every time you choose the easy distraction over the hard discipline, you are voting for the person you do not want to be. The votes add up. Over days, weeks, months, years, the votes become an identity. You become what you repeatedly do. So the question is not whether you are disciplined right now. The question is what your environment is voting for. If your environment is voting for distraction, you will become a distracted person. If your environment is voting for comfort, you will become a comfortable person. If your environment is voting for growth, you will become someone who grows. The environment does not care about your intentions. It does not care about your resolutions. It does not care about what you said you would do on January 1st. It cares about what it makes easy. And whatever it makes easy is what you will become. So make the right thing easy. That is the whole practice. That is the entire philosophy distilled into one instruction. Make the right thing easy and the wrong thing hard, and then let the architecture do the work. You will still have to show up. You will still have to sit on the cushion. You will still have to open the book. You will still have to lace up the shoes. But the showing up will be easier. The resistance will be lower. The friction will be less. And over time, the discipline that once felt like a battle will feel like a river. You will flow toward the person you want to be because the channel has been carved. The path has been cleared. The environment has been designed. Let me return to where we started. Discipline is not something you feel. It is something you design. You engineer your world so that virtue becomes the path of least resistance. That is not a platitude. That is a practice. It is a daily, deliberate, intentional practice of looking at your environment and asking one question. Is this working for me or against me? And if it is against you, change it. Not tomorrow. Now. Move the phone. Clear the chair. Pack the bag. Throw out the junk. Put the book on the pillow. Small changes. Tiny votes. Incremental architecture. 1% at a time. The Stoics did not have the language of habit loops and environment design. They did not have neuroscience or behavioral psychology. But they had something more important. They had the lived experience of men who held together when everything fell apart. Marcus Aurelius held an empire together from a war tent. Seneca held his composure through exile and political terror. Epictetus held his freedom while living as a slave. They did not do this through willpower alone. They did it through design. Through the deliberate construction of an inner and outer world that supported the person they chose to be. They understood that the environment shapes the person, and that the wise person shapes the environment right back. You are not weaker than them. You are not less capable. You have simply been playing a different game, on a field designed by people who do not have your best interests at heart. So stop playing their game. Redesign the field. Take control of the architecture of your life. Not all at once. Not in one dramatic gesture. In small, deliberate, patient changes that compound over time into something unshakable. And when you do, you will discover something. You will discover that discipline was never about forcing yourself to be someone you are not. It was about creating the conditions for the person you already are to finally emerge. The discipline was always in you. It just needed an environment that let it breathe. A space where it was not constantly under attack. A world where the right thing was the easy thing, and the easy thing was the true thing. So start tonight. One change. One piece of friction moved. One cue redesigned. One room reimagined. And tomorrow morning, when you wake up, the world you built will be waiting for you. Not the world that was handed to you. The world you chose. The world you designed. And in that world, discipline is not a struggle. It is a default. It is who you are when the environment finally stops fighting you and starts carrying you home. Choose design over willpower. Choose architecture over effort. Choose growth over ease.